Chapter 8. Dangerous History. Almost without needing to be told, Astegon stepped forward. With a deliberate calm that bordered on ceremonial, he reached up and removed his mask. The face beneath was unmistakable, younger, unlined, untouched by sickness or bitterness. The face Alwyn once wore, the face his son should have grown into. Alwyn did not look. He turned his gaze sharply aside, jaw tightening, eyes fixed on the stone floor, as if staring any longer might shatter him outright. But he didn't need to look to know what Valian saw. He saw it reflected instead, in the necromancer's widening eyes, and the slow curl of that sickening, knowing smile. Astegon didn't stop. He placed both hands beneath the edge of his white hide armor and peeled it upward, the material crackling faintly as frost-like residue clung and then sloughed away. Beneath it, his body lost its human illusion, slime rippling and flowing in slow, controlled currents. At his core, the orb revealed itself fully, embedded within his mass like a heart. The runes etched across its surface pulsed brighter, purple, violent, alive. Magic throbbed through the chamber, subtle but undeniable. Astegon let the armor fall back into place, his form re-solidifying just enough to remain upright, composed. Valian inhaled softly. He hummed, reverent and revolted all at once. He nodded, not at Astegon, but at Alwyn, a craftsman acknowledging mastery, even knowing the cost. At the archway, Thelos stirred as Grex finally removed his gauntleted hand from the young artificer's mouth. The moment the pressure lifted, words burst free in a frantic rush. What? They were talking? I thought that was a good moment to interpose. Grex turned his helm slightly, looking down at him.
You were seconds, the construct said flatly, from becoming a bloody mess.
There was no anger in his voice, no emphasis, just fact.
Seconds from causing a war.
Grex continued, crossing all four arms as he leaned his massive frame against the stone archway.
To start in the amphitheater.
Thelos swallowed. Grex's glowing gaze flicked back toward the two mages, and his brother standing half unmasked before them. Yeah, sorry, Thelos muttered, rubbing at his arm as if the words themselves stung. My master Trevelyan always said I was too outgoing, too open, too forward with people. He glanced up at Grex the way a younger sibling looks at an older one who has already decided they're disappointed. Grex exhaled slowly, a sound like stone grinding underwater.
Take it from me,
he said dismissively, waving one of his smaller hands as though brushing dust from the air.
Words spoken hastily aren't worth the time they save, or something like that.
Before Thelos could respond, a sharp laugh cut through the tension. Valian. My, the necromancer chuckled aloud, his gaze never leaving Astegon as it dragged itself across him piece by piece. A fully conscious frost elemental? His head tilted, lips curling. Or perhaps something better. Whatever the case, this is remarkable. That core, he gestured subtly toward Astegon's chest, must be the foundation of its stability, the way it maintains such a perfect form. He sighed, almost fondly. Your work here is simply peak.
Yes, this one is akin to the other.
He inclined his head slightly toward Grex.
But the runes required entirely different approaches. One is, his gaze flickered briefly, a prototype. The other a refined, fully realized adaptation.
As Alwyn spoke, his expression shifted. Pride faltered. His eyes caught Astegon's face, that face, and something in him twisted. The pride gave way to shame, then settled into something colder, controlled, professional. The conversation might have continued, might have worsened, had a presence not intruded. Heavy footsteps echoed across the stone. A hulking figure in white and gold paladin plate stepped into view, his shadow stretching across the amphitheater floor. He was broader even than Grex, his armor layered thick and unyielding. Though age showed in his bald crown and deeply wrinkled face, his body bore no such weakness. A massive iron tower shield rested across his back. A sword hung at his hip, worn smooth by decades of use. Grex moved instantly. He stepped to Alwyn's left without a word, his bulk interposing itself between the artificer and the approaching paladin. Astegon mirrored the motion on the other side, subtle but deliberate. The paladin stopped just short of them. His gray mustache twitched as he regarded the group, eyes sharp, assessing. Whatever piece was meant to be discussed here, it was already standing on a blade's edge.
"I see," the paladin said at last, his voice measured and noble in cadence, yet edged like a blade, "that you mages have spent your sparse time crafting nothing but horrific abominations."
The words were aimed broadly, but they landed squarely on Valian and Alwyn. Valian sneered, lips curling with practiced disdain, and turned away without another word. Whatever games he played, he knew better than to clash openly with a paladin here, not yet. Alwyn, however, smiled.
"And I see, Delvin," he replied coolly, brushing his thinning hair back as a smug confidence settled onto his face, "that the one holding your leash was too frightened to attend in person, sending his old hound to sit, listen, and wait to be put down."
His fists clenched, knuckles whitening. Delvin chuckled.
"I'm honored to sit for my leader, Lord Seeker Lowell," the paladin said easily. "He's unwell for the time being."
His gaze slid to Grex, then Astegon.
"But how fortunate I am to finally see Alwyn's little monsters in the flesh."
He leaned closer, armor creaking softly.
"I knew you'd come, and I thank you for showing your hand, old man."
His smile widened, bright and predatory.
"They'll be stained here soon enough, I'm certain."
Delvin stepped in until his breath brushed Alwyn's face.
"Much like my hands were stained with your brother's," he continued, voice low and intimate. "If only you'd stayed in the circle of Lostwick a bit longer, I'd have taken your head too, finished the collection."
His hand rose, slow and deliberate, settling not on the sword itself, but on the pommel. A promise, not a threat.
"Plaques line my walls," he added softly, "little pieces of the early rebellion, the War of Redwall."
The slander struck deep. Astegon's reaction was immediate. His form stiffened, ice threading through his body beneath the hide armor. Frosty breath rolled from his shoulders in thin gusts, his blue eyes burning brighter, sharper, angrier. Grex felt something else entirely, not rage, reduction. To Delvin, he was not a being, not a mind, just a thing, something Alwyn had made to be used and discarded. Both brothers stood ready, waiting, almost pouncing. But before either could move, Delvin reached out and gave Alwyn's shoulder a casual pat, chuckling as he turned away. The touch made the old artificer stumble. He coughed sharply, his clenched fists finally uncurling as he brought a hand to his mouth, fighting for breath. After a moment, he straightened again, unsteady but standing. That was when Thelos chose to rejoin them. Careful, quiet, as if stepping back into the orbit of something volatile and very close to exploding. Alwyn coughed once more, dry and brittle, then pushed his goggles firmly into place atop his head. The leather strap creaked faintly. Astegon mirrored him without thinking, his gloved fingers adjusting the white mask that hid his face. Cold blue light burned steadily through the eye slits, Grex shifted. Metal groaned as the hulking construct repositioned himself, feet grinding against marble. He planted himself wide, an unspoken barrier. Thelos lingered behind him, suddenly aware of how small he was in this place, how many eyes surrounded him, how many hands rested near spell foci and hilts. The murmurs in the amphitheater softened, then parted. Justin Forbes stepped into view. The Pope walked with the confidence of a man who had never known doubt. Tall and straight-backed, he moved as though the stone itself yielded to him. His blonde hair was neatly combed and bound, his square jaw clean and resolute. When his eyes, clear, radiant sapphire, passed over the crowd, they lingered, as if he truly saw every soul present. And when he smiled, the room changed. Tension loosened, shoulders lowered, hands drifted away from weapons. The hum of arcane energy dulled, replaced by something warmer, safer. White robes flowed from his shoulders, trimmed in gold thread that caught the light. Holy symbols, red daffodils, were embroidered across the fabric, icons of strength tempered by restraint. Grex felt something unfamiliar settle inside him. Not curiosity, not hunger, peace. Astegon felt it too, his posture eased, his form stabilizing just a fraction more than before. Even Alwyn, ever rigid, ever guarded, allowed himself the smallest release of breath. For one impossible moment, it felt as though the world might actually change. Justin reached the podium, resting his hands upon the carved petals of the sacred flower. The crystal spheres embedded within it pulsed softly, lightning whispering, starlight turning slowly within. Okay, every boom! Reality tore open. A surge of raw arcane force ripped through the amphitheater, screaming like a god being flayed alive. The blast didn't travel. It erased. Wood vaporized. Stone burst apart as if made of glass. Marble exploded into white shrapnel, shredding bodies mid-breath. Skeletons collapsed into ash. Flesh unraveled into streaming ribbons. Blood atomized into red mist before it could fall. There was no time to scream. Astegon moved. The world slowed to syrup as his body surged forward, joints flowing, ice and water reinforcing one another. He slammed into Alwyn with every ounce of mass he could muster, wrapping himself around the old artificer like a living shield. Alwyn didn't fight him. He didn't flinch. He smiled, a small, tired smile, as the arcane annihilation raced toward them at impossible speed. Grex turned. Armor shrieked as he twisted, throwing his full bulk between the blast and Thelos. His body boiled violently inside the metal shell, slime sloshing, pressure building. He spread himself wide, arms locking, stance rooted. The necromancer's flesh golem was torn apart in an instant, limbs ripped free, stitches undone, meat flung like wet parchment. Paladins vanished in flashes of gold and white, mages disintegrated mid-casting, spells detonating uselessly in their hands. The air burned, the stone screamed, magic howled in agony. Astegon felt his form strain, ice cracking, water churning as he absorbed heat and force meant to end lives. Grex felt the impact slam into him like a falling mountain. Neither brother looked at the other. They didn't need to. They shared the same thought, clear, absolute, unquestionable. Keep them safe. It wasn't spoken aloud. It didn't need to be. The order struck both brothers at once, absolute, unquestionable, and their bodies obeyed before thought could catch up. Astegon's mass surged tighter around Alwyn, layers of ice hardening as boiling currents of slime reinforced every fracture point. He wrapped the old man fully, becoming wall, coffin, and shield all at once. Grex hurled himself forward. Metal screamed as joints locked and overextended, his armor deforming under the force of the blast as he threw his entire weight between destruction and the small human behind him. Slime surged violently inside the shell, pressure building past anything Alwyn had ever intended. Thelos looked up. For one heartbeat, just one, the young artificer met Grex's gaze through the dark slit of his helm. Tears streaked his soot-stained face, but he smiled anyway. Awed, grateful, Grex felt something tear inside his core.
"Brother?"
The word escaped him, low, raw, unfinished. Thelos dissolved. Not burned, not crushed, simply unmade. His body broke apart into fine, pale dust that scattered on the air like ash from a forgotten fire. The smile was the last thing to vanish. Then the armor began to glow. Violet arcane runes flared violently across Grex's chestplate and along the seams of Astegon's torso, the metal orb embedded within the blue slime screaming to life. Symbols ignited, spinning faster and faster, bleeding raw magic into the air. The sound vanished. No explosion, no scream, no impact. The world folded inward. Light died. Color fled. Sensation collapsed into a single crushing void. In one swallowing instant of horror, everything became soundless, blind, and dark. Chapter 9. Rifts and Chains. Gargling and sloshing echoed through the stillness as the slimes stirred awake. Astegon wasted no time, slithering into his armor, its pieces adjusting fluidly around his amorphous body until he stood rigid and imposing. His glowing blue eyes swept the dim room, landing on the faintly purple bars that encased them both. Inside his metal shell, Grex shifted, the runes carved by their master casting a soft, eerie light. He tried to make sense of the unfamiliar surroundings, a cold, desolate dungeon, empty save for the echo of dripping water and the metallic clatter of his own armor. Astegon's appendages stretched toward the bars, attempting to slip past, but a soft grunt betrayed his frustration. His form was too wide, too rigid in some places, or even the same places, as though the bars were imbued with restraining magic. "Glug," Grex murmured, adjusting within his armor, the sound vibrating through the metal. He shifted beside Astegon, mirroring his brother's confusion. Both stared at their imprisonment, sensing that the desolation was intentional, and that whoever had placed them here wanted them disoriented. Then came the sound of approaching footsteps, heavy, measured, each step a statement. Metal clanked, echoing down the stone hallway. From the shadows emerged a man. Short brown hair framed a sharp, angular face, and his piercing yellow eyes seemed to burn through the gloom. A hand crossbow rested at his hip, and a longsword hung casually from the other. His armor matched the shape and design of the paladin's armor they had seen before, but it was not white and gold. Dark, burnished steel replaced the holy colors, and a red daffodil marked the center of his surcoat, a silent declaration of allegiance. He stepped forward with a rhythm that carried both pride and judgment, as though every measured movement was a prelude to pronouncement, or regret. He stopped just out of reach of the bars, letting the weight of his presence settle into the air between them. Astegon's eyes narrowed, blue light reflecting off the metal cage as he slid a step closer to Grex. The two brothers stood side by side, a united front despite the strange, hostile enclosure. They were ready.
"The first time in six years do both the mages and the paladins meet for peace, and suddenly the entire amphitheater explodes. Yet you two survive. How is that possible?"
The man's voice cut through the silence like iron, a low growl underlying each word. His gaze first burned into Grex, then shifted with cold precision to Astegon, as though daring them to answer.
"That is a good question, Astegon," Grex rumbled, his voice deep and mechanical, each word vibrating through the metal of his armor. Grex's attention didn't leave the man, but it did flicker to his brother as he sought guidance, or at least acknowledgement of the shared burden. Astegon turned slowly, first toward Grex, then back to the captain, his blue eyes flickering with faint streaks of violet. "I have no clue," he admitted, his voice steady but tight with suppressed emotion. "No clue how we're alive, let alone what happened at the amphitheater." As the words left his lips, tension surged through his fluid form. His slime-like body trembled slightly, the memories of Alwyn, the blast, and the grief that followed flooding into his consciousness like jagged shards of ice. Inside Grex's armor, the runes carved by their master began to pulse, faint at first, then growing in intensity. A resonance vibrated through the air, low and primal as if the stone walls themselves were aware. Astegon's orb mirrored the reaction, the runes on its surface igniting with the same vivid violet light. The twin sources of energy reverberated between them. Pain lanced through their forms. Grex grunted, his mass quivering, the armor groaning as if resisting the pressure. Astegon's body nearly lost cohesion, slipping into a puddle-like heap as he hissed through clenched teeth. Both were sent almost to their knees, their very forms struggling to resist the invisible force pressing down upon them. Breathing heavily, shuddering through every core of their bodies, the brothers forced themselves upright. The glow of the runes gradually dimmed, the pain ebbing with it, leaving them shaken but intact.
"Tell us what you know," Captain Colin said evenly, his voice devoid of heat, yet heavy with finality. "Or you will both be executed, one after the other, no trial, no witnesses." The words settled into the stone like a sentence already passed. Behind him stood a woman, silent until now. She wore a deep red gown that brushed her ankles, the hem parting just enough to reveal slender feet clad in thick black boots. Her upper half was wrapped in translucent black sleeves that clung softly to her arms, embroidered faintly with sigils only visible when the torchlight caught them just right. Long silver hair spilled down her back, framing a sharp face marked by 2 deliberate streaks of red paint, drawn beneath hazel eyes, ritualistic, not decorative. She shifted, clearly displeased. "My Lord Seeker," she said at last, her tone controlled but strained. "We need them. That is what the mage at the forward camp insists. Executions and trials can wait." Colin did not turn immediately. When he did, it was slow, deliberate, his yellow eyes fixing on her with a look that weighed authority against necessity. She met his gaze, then sighed quietly, conceding the moment before it became confrontation. "Better to test a one-trick pony's theory than gamble the fate of the world on our pride." She stepped forward before Captain Colin could respond, raising her hands. Her fingers began to move, precise, fluid, practiced. Each motion drew strands of the weave into visibility, glowing faintly between her fingertips like threads of light caught in a dancer's grasp. The air hummed as magic answered her will, the invisible lattice surrounding the cell unraveling stroke by stroke. The violet glow of the runes embedded in the bars dimmed, then vanished entirely. With a dull metallic click, the iron door swung open. Inside the cell, Grex shifted violently, his mass surging within the armor as restrained fury threatened to break loose. Before it could, Astegon lifted a hand, not toward their captors, but toward his brother. A silent command. Wait. Grex stilled, though the tension remained, vibrating beneath his plates. Together, the brothers stepped out of the cell. Their movements were slow, measured, deliberate, not submissive, but controlled. They came to a halt before Captain Colin and the woman, standing shoulder to shoulder, their presence filling the narrow corridor with an unspoken warning. The cage was open, but none of them believed, even for a moment, that they were free.
"Follow us,"
Captain Colin commanded, his tone sharp, unyielding. He turned, his armor clinking with authority, and the woman moved beside him, her red gown brushing the polished stone floor with every step. The two of them walked toward the massive wooden doors at the far end of the hall, a deliberate cadence that left no room for hesitation. Grex's body shifted violently within the armor, his green mass undulating as he prepared to strike, claws extended, aimed at the back of the woman's head. But Astegon's hand shot out, halting him mid-motion. He let out a low, controlled blub, a warning that was more than a suggestion. Running, ambushing, they both knew the outcomes would not favor them. Patience, not violence, was the path forward. With silent acknowledgement, the two slimes fell into step behind their captors. The doors swung open and the world outside hit them like a blade of light. The gray clouds hung heavy above, diffusing the sun into a pale, silvery glare that nearly blinded the creatures. Both slimes recoiled instinctively, their forms contracting as the harsh light seared their senses. At first, it seemed they were back in Haven, the familiar landscape of town stalls, cobblestone streets, and modest shops, but the familiarity was a cruel trick. The market square, the hallways, even the temple, they were gone. The world before them had been reshaped by a force unimaginable. The mountain that had once held the Temple of Sacred Pires was now grotesque and unrecognizable. The peak had been sheared away, stripped to jagged rock. Smoke and smog bellowed from the fissures, twisting into the gray clouds above. Streaks of purple and blinding blue light clawed skyward, weaving through the clouds like wild threads of arcane energy, writhing and colliding in a chaotic ballet. The slimes staggered backward, their backs pressing against the heavy wooden doors they had just passed through, seeking whatever cover they could find. Grex's armor rattled with unease, the runes along his plates flickering faintly in response to the raw energy in the air. Astegon's glowing blue eyes scanned the shattered mountain, taking in the scale of destruction, yet he remained stoic, trying to steady both himself and his brother against the onslaught of sensory overload. But the world did not pause for the brothers to process the devastation around them. Without warning, a violent eruption of arcane energy tore through the air. Purple light, raw and electric, surged outward like a storm unleashed, brushing through the twisted trees, the ruined buildings, and finally the two slimes themselves. The glow licked along Grex's armor and Astegon's orb, igniting the runes carved into their forms. The magic burned, not in fire, but in a deep, searing pressure that weakened and strained their bodies, forcing them to stagger. The captain's eyes, sharp and calculating, flicked to the stumbling creatures. His gaze was equal parts curiosity and assessment, weighing their strength against the chaos that now swept the land.
"You two had a nice 3-day nap while the world went to hell," Captain Colin said, his voice low and steady. He gestured upward toward the source of the magical eruption, the shaved, jagged peak of the mountain. "Up there," he indicated the devastated summit, "there's a pit. Demons have been pouring out of it like it's some kind of infernal faucet. The people have dubbed it the Cataclysm. Me, I call it the Breach."
The woman beside him stepped forward, her hands moving in a subtle, almost ritualistic dance, fingers tracing faint patterns in the air that caught the residual magic like threads in a web. Her voice was calm, precise, but carried the weight of urgency. "And a mage foresaw this, the same mage who saved you two from the wreckage. That wreckage at the top, The mage insists that you are the key. You two are essential to sealing the breach before it consumes everything below."
"Yes, but we cannot let you ascend unarmed," Captain Colin continued, glancing at the two slimes. His voice was firmer now, carrying the authority of a man used to command. "And we cannot let you go alone. I will accompany you to the summit myself."
The two slimes exchanged a glance, the air thick with unspoken understanding. Their master's teachings, their own instincts, and the weight of the world pressed down on them. Even amidst the chaos, the mission was clear. Reach the mountains, face the horrors that had erupted from the breach, and survive. With a sharp, metallic snap of Colin's fingers, two soldiers broke into a run, boots slapping against stone as they approached in a sheen of sweat and panic. Each carried a weapon, held out with both hands as though the objects themselves carried weight beyond steel.
"Here you go, sir," the men shouted in unison as they skidded to a halt before the two slimes.
Grex did not hesitate. One of his 4 hands reached out and seized the hammer instantly. It was the same weapon he had carried at Alwyn's side, one he had forged himself from the scrap that littered the workshop floor. The shaft was too long, too thin for proper balance, yet heavy even in Grex's massive grip. The head was a brutal thing, thick as a brick and nearly 3 times as large, studded with jagged spikes and etched with scattered runes that held no spell, no enchantment, no formal meaning. But Grex didn't need them to. This hammer was his creation, his tool, his answer. Beside him, Astegon accepted his weapon with far more care. His hand closed around the hilt of an expertly crafted scimitar, and with a practiced motion he spun the blade once, letting it swing softly through the air. Alwyn had never favored martial weapons. Spells were faster, stronger, more versatile in his eyes. But Astegon was no grand master of the weave, not yet, and Alwyn had known better than to send him into the world with magic alone. So he had forged this instead. The scimitar was thin and elegantly curved, its handle plated in warm gold. The blade's edge shimmered with a sharp, icy blue, while faint runes traced along its length, lightweight, precise, alive. They pulsed gently in response to the glow of Astegon's orb, resonating as if the weapon itself recognized its bearer. With a final controlled motion, Astegon guided the blade into its white leather sheath, the quiet click echoing louder than any declaration. Armed now, the brothers lifted their gaze. The chaos before them was no longer just devastation. It was purpose. Whatever waited at the summit of the mountain was no longer a mystery to fear, but an answer to claim. Their master's death had begun there, and it would end there too. Colin waved the soldiers away and pointed toward the front gates of Haven, where smoke, screams, and distant roars bled into the air. "Out there," he said, voice firm and unyielding, "are swarms of demons ready to tear apart anyone foolish enough to stand in their way. Now that you're armed, you swing first, and you keep my men breathing." He stepped closer, eyes locking with each of the brothers in turn. "We march up that mountain as one, or we don't march at all." Colin turned sharply and gestured toward the gates. "Go on. No more standing around." Chapter 10. Rifts and Chains, Part 2. The front gates of Haven groaned as they were thrown wide. Cold air rushed in first, thick with ash, iron, and the faint sting of arcane residue. Grex and Astegon marched at Colin's side, their metal-shod footsteps heavy against the stone, as the city fell away behind them. Beyond the gates, the land dipped violently, torn open by war and magic alike. A chasm split the battlefield straight down its center. It yawned wide and jagged, its depths shallowed by shadow and drifting smoke. Across it stretched a makeshift bridge of stacked stone and broken masonry. uneven and roughly fitted together. It bowed slightly at the center, held in place by desperation rather than design. Cracks webbed across its surface, each one a promise that it would not last forever. At the bridge's near end, soldiers waited. Men stood in pairs behind crude wooden spike barricades, shields braced, spears angled forward. Their armor was scuffed and dented, cloaks torn by claws and flame. Some muttered prayers under their breath, others stared forward, unmoving, as if locking their bodies in place would still the fear clawing at their insides. Beyond the bridge, farther down the broken road, they waited. Creatures crawled from the smoke and rubble like things dragged from nightmares half remembered. Some slithered low to the ground, their bodies thin and malformed, skin stretched tight and slick like wet leather. Long black hair dragged behind them as they moved, faceless heads tilted at unnatural angles. Their hands ended in claws, black, hooked, and scraping as they pulled themselves forward in jerking, hungry motions. Others stood upright. These were taller, broader. Their forms were more complete, built with a mockery of muscle and strength. Shadow and flesh twisted together into powerful torsos and thick limbs. Where eyes should have been, there was nothing, only smooth, empty plains of skin. But their mouths split wide across their faces, stretching too far, filled with layered fangs that gleamed wetly in the dim light. From their skulls sprouted horns like twisted branches, jagged and uneven, curling backward as if grown rather than formed. The air trembled. Grex's grip tightened around his hammer. Astegon's fingers brushed the hilt of his scimitar. Then the sky screamed. A shrill, tearing sound split the clouds overhead, followed by a roar like the world itself cracking open. Soldiers barely had time to look up before a blazing shape tore through the heavens. The meteor struck. It slammed into the earth just beyond the bridge, obliterating barricades and men alike in a single violent instant. Stone, wood, and bodies were hurled outward as the ground caved in on itself. A shockwave rippled through the battlefield, knocking soldiers off their feet and rattling armor like thrown dice. From the crater, a sickly blue glow pulsed outward, staining the smoke and ash with unnatural light. The glow thickened. Then the demons rose. They clawed their way out of the impact site, bodies steaming, flesh knitting together as if the fall had been nothing more than an inconvenience. Blue light seeped from the cracks in their skin, pooling in their mouths and along their claws as they pulled themselves upright, laughing without sound. Men screamed. Orders were shouted, but Grex and Astegon did not recoil. They did not step back. They stood at the front of the march, runes within their armor and orb beginning to glow in answer to the arcane violence before them. Grex rolled his shoulders, the hammer's weight settling into him like a familiar truth. Astegon's eyes burned brighter through his mask, cold and focused. Fear had no place here, not when their master lay dead ahead of them, not when the mountain waited ahead, not when the answer stood between them and the summit. Colin raised his sword high. "Hold the line!" he roared. Grex had been ready for violence since the moment he woke in the dungeon. Now he had reason. With thunderous, uneven strides, the metallic giant surged forward, each step shaking the torn earth beneath him. His hammer came up in a brutal arc, then crashed upward with a roar of steel and slime. The strike split the air itself, forcing the charging demons to scatter, their clawed limbs scrambling as they leapt clear of the monstrous swing. Stone shattered, ash and dirt exploded skyward. Grex grunted as debris rained down around him. Astegon moved more slowly. His glowing blue eyes swept the battlefield, taking in everything. The broken barricades, the fallen soldiers, the way the demons flowed like a tide rather than an army. There was curiosity in his gaze, and something like disbelief. He had studied battle in theory, learned it from Alwyn's lessons and diagrams, but this was chaos. The hesitation cost him seconds. Demons slipped past Grex's advance, low bodies skittering across the ground as they surged toward the blue slime. Faceless heads tilted, mouths peeling open into grins of fangs as they lunged. Grex sighed instantly. Without turning, his body reacted. From the seams of his gauntlets, green slime poured outward in a single roaring mass. His form stretched and flattened, flowing beneath one of the crawling demons like a living shadow. The creature shrieked as it sank into the acidic body, its claws scraping uselessly as flesh hissed and dissolved. At the far edge of the pool, 4 clawed limbs surged up. With a violent wrench, Grex reeled the demon back toward himself. The creature's scream cut short as it vanished into his grasp. Astegon snapped to the sound. 3 more demons were already upon him. "Blub!" He moved. Astegon twisted between snapping jaws and clawed swipes, his body flowing just enough to let blows glance harmlessly past. His scimitar flashed into existence, the white leather sheath left empty as steel met flesh. He parried bite after bite, blade ringing cold and clear, as he redirected their momentum rather than meeting it head-on. Then he leaned back and reached inside his own form. His hand closed around the orb beneath his armor. The runes carved into its surface spun and flared, glowing brighter as Astegon tore a piece of himself free. The slime stretched outward, slick and glistening, spreading into a wide, dripping net. With a sharp pull, snap! The net hardened instantly, freezing mid-air into jagged, translucent ice. The crawling demon caught inside it slammed to the ground, trapped as frost crawled over its limbs, locking it in place. But the battlefield did not slow. From the forest line, more shapes emerged, dozens of them. They poured from between blackened trees and broken roots, shadows moving too fast, too many. Crawlers surged low, while the larger, upright demons charged in behind them, their fanged mouths opening in silent laughter as they barreled toward the towering green slime at the front. Grex turned to face them, and did not move an inch backward. He readies his hammer again. He might have missed the perfect angle on his first strike, but the oncoming demons were not going to make him boil. Not yet. With a growl that rattled inside his metal frame, he swung again. The hammer cut through the air like a siege engine. Trees along the roadside bent inward as the wind howled, bark splitting under the force of the blow. The skull of the lead demon didn't crack. It detonated, bursting into shards of bone and shadow. Its body flew backward, colliding with another charging demon, and bowling both of them into the line below. They rolled, tangled and screeching, limbs snapping at nothing. The horde stumbled. For a brief moment, the tide broke. Astegon looked up from his own skirmish and saw it. The aftermath. The wreckage his brother had made of living things. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his face. Not pride, not joy. Recognition. Chomp! The demon was quick, and Astegon was too distracted. The demon leapt, and with a twist of its jaws takes a chunk off of Astegon's body. But the blue slime didn't look at the creature with pain. The chunk torn from his side sagged, half detached, stretching like thick liquid glass between Astegon and the demon's teeth. Frost raced across the wound instead of blood. The demon landed, jaws still clamped around its prize, expecting a scream, a stumble, something living. Astegon's head tilted. "Curious," he murmured. The demon tried to pull back. It failed. Astegon stepped forward, planting his foot hard into the shattered stone. The bridge groaned beneath the sudden shift in weight. With one hand he seized the demon by the jaw, fingers sinking into flesh that should not have yielded so easily, and with the other he twisted his torso, using the creature's own momentum like a lever. The demon shrieked as Astegon wrenched it free. He spun. The blue slime's body flowed and locked at once, ice reinforcing his form as he completed the motion. With a sharp exhale, Astegon hurled the demon up and over his shoulder. It sailed through the air, flailing, striking the uneven stones of the bridge with a sickening crunch before skidding toward the edge. The chasm swallowed it whole. Astegon straightened, the missing piece of his body already crawling back into place, sealing seamlessly as if the bite had never happened. Around him, demons hesitated, not retreating, but reassessing. The battlefield shifted. Something ancient and animal recognized a predator that did not behave correctly. Then the bridge screamed again. A sound unlike claws or steel split the stone beneath Astegon's feet. A wet, echoing crack that vibrated through his core. The surface of the bridge bulged and burst. A shape speared upward from below, phasing through rock as if it were smoke. This demon was wrong in a different way. Its body was long and thin, translucent like rotting ice, its limbs trailing wisps of shadow that faded and reformed constantly. Where its lower half should have been, there was nothing but drifting vapor, anchored to the chasm itself. Its arms wrapped around Astegon's torso. Cold unlike his own slammed into him, void cold, absence cold. Whispers flooded his thoughts, overlapping voices promising quiet, promising stillness, promising that falling would finally make sense. The bridge gave way. Stone cracked outward from the point of impact, and suddenly Astegon was no longer standing on anything at all. The ghost demon dragged him backward, half of his body already over empty space, claws phasing through his armor and ice alike as it tightened its grip. For the first time since his creation, Astegon felt something slip. Not fear, orientation. The world tilted. The battlefield above blurred as the chasm opened beneath him, vast and hungry. Wind howled upward, tearing at his cloak and armor. He calculated distances, angles, mass, but there was no leverage, no footing, no surface to anchor against. He was falling. "Astegon!" Colin's shout cut through the din, sharp with panic. Grex turned. The green giant saw everything at once, the fractured bridge, the ghost demon dragging his brother toward nothing, the way Astegon's fingers clawed uselessly at air. Something inside Grex snapped, not violently, but decisively. With a roar that tore from deep within his armor, Grex moved. Metal plates split along hidden seams as his body overextended far past what it was meant to contain. Emerald slime surged outward in massive torrents, pouring from his gauntlets, shoulders, even the cracks in his chest plate. His form anchored itself to the bridge with brutal force, hooved feet digging into stone as the ground cracked beneath him. Then his body reached. A colossal arm of living slime shot across the gap, wrapping around Astegon's forearm in an instant. Another followed, coiling around his waist, locking tight. The pull nearly tore Grex forward, his armor shrieking in protest as the chasm fought back. The ghost demon screamed. Grex's slime burned where it touched the creature, reality rejecting the thing's half-existence. The demon clawed desperately at Astegon, trying to drag him down faster, whispers turning shrill and frantic as its grip weakened. "No," Grex growled, voice shaking the bridge. "Not him." With a final violent heave, Grex wrenched Astegon upward and back. The ghost demon lost its hold, its form unraveling as it was torn free from the stone. It fell alone. Its scream stretched impossibly long as it plunged into the chasm, dissolving into smoke and silence long before it could ever hit bottom. Astegon slammed back onto the bridge hard enough to crater the stone, ice exploding outward in jagged lines. Grex hauled him the rest of the way, slime retracting back into his armor in heavy, exhausted waves as the seams sealed shut once more. For a moment, the battlefield held its breath. Astegon pushed himself up to one knee. He looked down at the chasm, then up at Grex. Blue light burned steadily behind his mask. "Thank you, brother," he said quietly. Grex said nothing. He simply stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Astegon and the abyss, hammer lowering into a ready position. His armor steamed. Cracks glowed faintly green. He was damaged, but unyielding. The demons did not wait. They surged again, crawling and charging across the broken bridge, shrieks and laughter blending into a single hateful roar. Colin raised his sword once more, voice hoarse but unbroken, as soldiers rallied behind the two constructs. "Hold!" Astegon rose fully to his feet. Ice crept across his armor as his grip tightened on his scimitar. He looked at the oncoming horde, not with curiosity now, but clarity. The bridge would not hold forever, so neither would the demons. The road beyond the bridge climbed sharply, winding its way up the broken flank of the mountain like a scar that refused to heal. What had once been a patrol path was now little more than a churned ribbon of stone and ash, carved deeper by boots, blood, and the dragging claws of things that should never have walked beneath the sky. Colin led the march at a hard pace, barking orders as soldiers struggled to reform their line. The men did what they could, shields up, spears out, driving demons back just long enough to carve a narrow corridor forward. Each step was paid for in sweat and steel. Each pause cost another life. Grex did not slow. He moved with purpose so absolute it bordered on inevitability. Every step up the mountain was measured, relentless, as though the summit itself were calling him. His hammer hung low at his side, ready but unused, his glowing green seams steady and focused. He did not look at the demons unless they stood directly in his way. They were obstacles, nothing more. Colin noticed. His gaze lingered on the towering construct as they climbed, watching how Grex's posture never wavered, how his stride never faltered even as claws scraped against his armor or bodies broke against his frame. There was no hesitation in him, no doubt, only forward motion. Astegon, by contrast, was not looking ahead at all. His glowing blue eyes tracked the demons with unnerving intensity. He watched the way they moved, their timing, their spacing, the subtle differences between the crawlers and the upright horrors. He observed how they reacted to pain, how they coordinated without words, how some recoiled from certain angles of attack, while others pressed harder. It was not fear. It was not even caution. It was study. "If any of the Lord's Seekers had been here," Colin thought distantly, "they would have recognized these monsters as threats at once." Astegon was learning. A shout snapped him from his thoughts, not from below, but from above. A crack of thunder split the mountain air, sharp and violent. Lightning tore downward in jagged arcs, striking somewhere higher up the path. The flash painted the rocks white for a split second, followed by screams, demonic, high and shrill, cut abruptly short. Then steel rang, fast, close, desperate. Grex stopped. Astegon looked up. Another blast of lightning ripped through the smoke ahead, followed by the unmistakable sound of bodies hitting stone. Blood splattered down the slope in dark, steaming rivulets. "They're fighting," Colin said, realization dawning. "Forward!" Before he could give the order, Grex was already moving. The green giant surged uphill, abandoning the soldiers entirely. Stone cracked beneath his weight as he charged, hammer rising as demons scrambled to intercept him. He plowed through them without slowing, bodies bursting or flying aside like debris in a storm. Astegon followed, lighter, faster, ice forming beneath his feet to propel him upward in long, bounding strides. The path opened into a wider shelf of rock, and there they were. 2 figures stood back to back amid a sea of demons. The first was tall and cloaked, robes scorched and torn, a staff clutched in both hands. Runes blazed along its length as the figure slammed its base into the stone, unleashing another violent surge of lightning. The blast ripped through a cluster of demons, leaving charred, twitching remains smoking on the ground. The second was smaller, much smaller. A halfling moved like a shadow given knives, darting between legs and claws, vanishing and reappearing in blurs of motion. Twin daggers flashed, sinking into joints, throats, and eyes before the demons even realized he was there. He rolled, slid, vanished into smoke, then struck again, efficient, lethal, and already bleeding from a dozen shallow wounds. They were good, but they were surrounded. The 2 figures were backed against a cliff, and before them lay a glowing purple fissure, torn across the surface of the snowy rock shelf. From within crawled forth demons spewing outward like a wave of writhing claws and teeth. They pressed in from all sides, crawling over rocks and bodies alike, screeching as they closed the circle. The cloaked figure staggered as a clawed arm slipped past their guard, lightning faltering for half a second. The halfling snarled something sharp and furious, leaping to intercept, but there were too many. Astegon felt something shift inside him. Assessment complete. "Grex," he said calmly. The green giant was already there. Grex hit the edge of the swarm like a falling tower. His hammer came down in a brutal overhead strike, pulverizing 3 demons into the stone and sending shockwaves rippling outward. The ground cracked, throwing enemies off their feet as Grex waded in, roaring, his body expanding as slime surged from his armor to seize, crush, and dissolve anything that came too close. Astegon slipped past him, moving with surgical precision. Ice formed along his scimitar as he severed limbs, froze torsos in place, shattered heads with precise, controlled blows. Where Grex was devastation, Astegon was erasure. The pressure on the 2 cloaked figures vanished in seconds. The halfling skidded to a stop, breathing hard, daggers raised, then froze as he took in the towering green monster and the blue-eyed figure beside it. "Well," he muttered, grinning despite the blood on his teeth, "that's a damned bloody sight." The staff-wielder turned, lightning fading as their grip loosened. They stared at Grex and Astegon in stunned silence for just a heartbeat longer, then inclined their head, cautious but grateful. The demons screamed as the last of them broke and fled down the mountain. Grex stood still, hammer dripping ichor, chest heaving. Astegon's eyes lingered on the 2 survivors, not with suspicion, but with interest.